You don't need closure. You don't need a long text. You don't need to prove your worth. You need 5 silent moves, calculated, bold, and unapologetic, that'll do what your words never could, shatter the ego of the one who thought you'd never walk away. Let me tell you something right now. An avoidant ex didn't just break your heart. They fed off your silence, your confusion, your need for answers. They counted on you shrinking, chasing, waiting. But not anymore, because today we flip the script. Today you stop being the one who needs validation, and you become the storm they never saw coming. Going silent is often misunderstood. People think silence is weakness, or that disappearing from someone's life is childish, avoidant, or petty. But here's the truth most don't want to admit. Disappearing is power. When you've been in a relationship with someone avoidant, someone who runs from connection, intimacy, or accountability, the greatest impact you can make isn't in what you say, it's in what you don't say. It's the moment you choose to stop showing up, stop justifying, stop chasing clarity that was never coming. Silence in that moment becomes your greatest weapon. When you remove yourself from someone who's been emotionally unavailable, it forces them to confront the very thing they've been running from themselves. An avoidant often relies on your presence to keep their ego inflated. They distance themselves to feel control, but they expect you to always be somewhere in the background, liking their posts, watching their stories, maybe sending the occasional text when the silence gets too loud for you. They've trained themselves to believe that you won't really leave, that you'll stick around in emotional limbo, waiting for them to come back when it suits them. So when you vanish, truly vanish, it rattles that belief to its core. Suddenly, the attention they counted on disappears. The validation they took for granted is gone. There's no more emotional supply, and for someone whose self-worth is often tied to feeling wanted without needing to reciprocate, that absence is deafening. But this isn't about revenge. This isn't about making someone hurt. This is about you reclaiming your energy. You're not disappearing to be cruel. You're disappearing because begging someone to value you was slowly making you forget your own worth. Silence becomes a boundary, a declaration, a spiritual reset. And it says something no text message ever could. You don't get access to me anymore. That level of self-respect is magnetic and deeply unsettling to someone who is banking on your emotional dependence. You are no longer proving your love, no longer showing up in ways that exhaust you. You stop explaining your value and start living like it. And that is terrifying to the person who thought they could hold you on standby forever. Disappearing doesn't mean you're running away. It means you're choosing yourself for the first time in a long time. It means you've stopped playing the unspoken game where they pull away and you chase them. You realize that chasing someone who avoids closeness only depletes you. So you do the unthinkable. You get still. You get silent. You disappear, not into sadness, but into purpose, into growth, into your next level. And here's what happens next. They notice. Maybe not right away because the ego is slow to admit pain, but they feel it. The absence, the space you used to fill, the energy you used to bring. They wonder why you haven't reached out. They check if you've seen their story. They hesitate before posting something, hoping you'll bite, but you don't. You're gone. And that silence, it screams. It forces them to feel the loss they never thought they'd have to confront. So no, disappearing isn't petty. It's powerful. It's not weak. It's transformative. It says, I no longer need to be seen by you to see myself clearly. And that shift, not loud, not dramatic, just grounded and quiet, can do more damage to an avoidant ego than any confrontation ever could. Disappearance is not about becoming invisible. It's about becoming untouchable. And when your peace speaks louder than your pain, you've already won. There's a misconception that when you improve yourself after a breakup, especially after dealing with an emotionally unavailable or avoidant partner, you're doing it to make them jealous. People say, ooh, that glow up is just to show them what they lost. But that kind of thinking completely misses the point. The real glow up, the one that changes your life and shakes their ego, isn't for them. It's for you. And when it's rooted in self-worth rather than revenge, it becomes a kind of power that's impossible to ignore. But when the opposite happens, when you start to glow up mentally, emotionally, physically, it threatens the entire story they've told themselves. Because let's be clear, this glow up isn't just about hitting the gym or changing your hairstyle. It's about how you carry yourself. It's in your energy. It's in the way you start walking into rooms like you belong there, without shrinking, without waiting for anyone's approval. You start investing in yourself, in your healing, in your future. You set goals, you chase them, and most importantly, you stop living in the past. You stop revolving your identity around someone who couldn't even meet you halfway. That shift is seismic, and when your avoidant ex sees it, whether directly or through the grapevine, it does something to them that they can't always articulate. It stirs discomfort. It pokes a hole in their ego, because for the first time, they're forced to consider that maybe they weren't the best thing that ever happened to you. Maybe you didn't lose when they walked away. Maybe they did. And here's where the power really kicks in. When you stop performing, when you're no longer posting to provoke a reaction, when you stop caring whether or not they're watching, that's the part they can't handle. Because the moment you genuinely stop needing them to notice is the moment they start to feel irrelevant. Avoidant individuals are often emotionally detached, but they're not immune to ego bruises. Seeing someone they assumed would always be there, rise higher, look healthier, sound happier, that shakes them. Especially when you're doing it without bitterness, without a single attempt to get their attention. They'll say to themselves, was I the problem? Was I actually holding them back? And whether they admit it or not, the answer begins to settle in. But again, the point isn't to win the breakup. It's to win yourself back. Because when you commit to your growth, your healing, and your future, something radical happens. You start to attract a life that feels too big for the version of you that used to chase breadcrumbs. You no longer need closure from someone who couldn't offer connection. You don't crave apologies. You just keep rising. And that rise, that's the real glow up. The one that doesn't need filters or validation. The one that makes your avoidant ex question everything they thought they knew about you. But most importantly, it's the one that reminds you that your worth was never tied to their recognition. You glow up because it's your turn now. Because the pain taught you, but it didn't define you. Because your future is bigger than their ego. And when you finally see that clearly, you become untouchable and they become a lesson you outgrew. Indifference is the ultimate power move. There's a moment after a breakup, especially with an avoidant ex, when you feel this overwhelming need to prove something. You want to prove you mattered, that they lost something valuable, that you weren't just another phase in their emotionally distant cycle. And that desire makes it so tempting to react, to post things, to send messages, to show you're hurt, angry, or doing just fine without them. But here's the hard truth. The more emotional you get, the more control you hand back to them. And that's why indifference is the ultimate power move, because it's the exact opposite of what they expect. Avoidant people thrive on emotional imbalance. They're comfortable in distance, in coldness, in ambiguity, but what makes them feel superior is knowing that you're still emotionally entangled. You might think that telling them off, expressing your pain, or letting them see you sad will somehow move them, shake them, wake them up. It won't. It only feeds their ego. It confirms that they still have emotional leverage over you, even if they're the ones who pushed you away. Now, imagine the opposite. Imagine them reaching out after weeks or months just to test the waters. They send a casual message, "Hey, how have you been?" They're not asking because they care deeply. They're asking to check if the door is still open. They want to know if you'll light up when they say your name. And when you respond with calm, collected neutrality, not cold, not angry, just unmoved, it creates a reaction in them they didn't anticipate: confusion. You see, when you're indifferent, it forces them to question their control. They're used to people fighting for clarity, for affection, for answers. But when you no longer need any of that, when you treat them like just another person, no more special than a stranger, it bruises the very ego that kept them detached in the first place. Because avoidant people aren't emotionless, they're just emotionally guarded. And when their emotional currency, your attention is gone, they feel it deeply. Indifference isn't pretending not to care. It's actually not caring. And that takes work. It means processing your pain, not burying it. It means facing your own wounds and understanding that their inability to love you properly wasn't a reflection of your worth. It was a limitation of their capacity. When you do that, your energy changes. You stop reacting. You stop trying to get their attention. You stop needing them to see how much you've grown or how happy you are now, because suddenly they just don't matter the same way anymore. And that's what makes indifference so powerful. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a mic drop. It's quiet, steady, and unshakable. It's a new standard you live by where your peace costs too much to be traded for validation. They can send the text. They can view your stories. They can test the limits. But when you're no longer emotionally available to someone who mishandled your heart, they feel it like a door slamming shut, but without the drama. Just a soft click, final, done. Indifference is your graduation. It's your emotional boundary wrapped in silence. It tells the world and them that your heart is no longer for sale to someone who couldn't meet it halfway. It's not a strategy to win them back. It's the quiet evidence that you already won because you took your power back without needing to say a word. Silent boundaries, the unspoken power move. Boundaries are often misunderstood. People think they have to be loud, confrontational, or dramatic to be effective. But the truth is, some of the strongest boundaries you'll ever set are the ones you don't announce. They're not about punishing someone. They're about protecting yourself. And when it comes to dealing with an avoidant ex, silent boundaries aren't just powerful. They're necessary. Because the more you try to explain yourself to someone who doesn't have the emotional capacity to hear you, the more you end up drained, disappointed, and stuck in a cycle that serves no one. An avoidant ex is someone who thrives in distance, vagueness, and unpredictability. They send mixed signals. One day they're affectionate, the next they're cold. They avoid accountability, depth, and real emotional intimacy, not because they don't feel anything, but because closeness threatens their sense of control. When you try to set verbal boundaries with someone like that, they often spin it. They might accuse you of being too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy. That's why silent boundaries are your secret weapon. They bypass the argument altogether. Instead of telling them you need space, you take it. You stop responding to their breadcrumb messages, the how are you texts with no intention behind them. You stop watching their stories or checking their updates. You unfollow, mute, or block. Not to make a statement, but to reclaim your mental clarity. When you silently remove their access to you, it sends a message they can't deflect. You're not available anymore. And they can't twist it. They can't argue with it. All they're left with is distance and silence. And here's the thing. Avoidant people feel that silence. They might not say anything. They might pretend not to notice. But trust me, they do. They notice when you don't reply. They notice when your name stops showing up in their notifications. They notice when your energy is no longer orbiting around theirs, because deep down, they relied on that energy. They relied on your presence, even if they never admitted it. Your silence creates a space they can't control, and that's where their discomfort begins. But the beauty of silent boundaries is that they aren't rooted in bitterness. They're rooted in peace. You're not cutting someone off because you hate them. You're cutting off the dynamic that was costing you your self-respect. You're no longer available for confusion, no longer available for emotional inconsistency. You're not angry, you're just done. And that kind of calm, grounded detachment, that's what really unsettles someone who's used to holding power through emotional ambiguity. Setting silent boundaries also does something incredible for you. It gives you back your emotional space. No more checking your phone, waiting for them to reach out. No more second-guessing your worth based on their inconsistent behavior. You stop managing their feelings and start managing your own. That's where real healing begins, not in getting closure from them, but in closing the door yourself and locking it with your own decision. And the best part, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't have to justify your peace. You don't need to make them understand why you had to walk away. You simply walk. You protect your heart, your mind, your energy, and you do it in silence. Let them feel your absence. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the space where your attention used to be. Because when you enforce silent boundaries with someone who once felt entitled to your time, energy, and emotions, you're not just protecting yourself. You're teaching them without a word that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. Elevation without explanation. There comes a point after heartbreak when you realize words aren't enough. You've said everything. You've cried, pleaded, explained your feelings, and tried to make them see your worth, and none of it worked. Especially with someone avoidant, someone who dodges intimacy, avoids accountability, and runs the moment things get too real. That's when you learn one of the most powerful lessons of all. Your greatest transformation happens in silence. You don't tell them what they lost, you show it through your elevation. And you do it without explanation, without announcements, and without asking them to witness it. That's the final blow to their ego. Avoidant exes don't respond to confrontation. They shut down. They disappear. They make you feel like your emotions are too much. And for a while, you might have believed them. You might have internalized the idea that you had to tone yourself down, or wait for them to be ready, or keep proving that you were enough. But when you finally stop trying, when you stop trying to be understood, chosen, or validated, you rise. Not to hurt them, not to seek revenge, but because you finally put the focus back on the one person they distracted you from, yourself. Elevation without explanation is the quietest form of power. You don't need to post about your progress. You don't need to show off your healing. You simply start living differently. You become unavailable to the patterns that used to trap you. You stop answering to the version of yourself that was always stuck in emotional survival mode. You make new choices. You surround yourself with people who see your worth without needing a performance. You build a life that reflects who you've become, not who you had to be in order to be loved by someone unavailable. And when they notice, and they will, they'll feel the shift. Avoidant people expect you to stay stuck. They expect you to leave a door open. So when you don't reach out, when you don't engage, when you stop reacting and start evolving, it hits them in a way they can't ignore. Not because you've said anything, but because your absence is now paired with undeniable growth. You're not just gone. You've elevated. You're out of reach, not physically maybe, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You've outgrown the place where they could find you. And the truth is, there's nothing more damaging to their ego than realizing they no longer have access, not just to your time or your body, but to your heart. You don't explain your boundaries. You don't clarify your silence. You don't offer a front row seat to your glow up. They're left on the outside, watching glimpses through the cracks, if at all. And that for someone who used to believe you'd never let go is devastating. But the beauty of this kind of rise is that it's not for them. It's for you. You're not living your life in hopes they'll come back. You're living because you finally remember who you are. Because you've turned your pain into clarity. Because every time you chose yourself instead of chasing them, you built something stronger within. And now you're standing on that foundation, quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. This isn't about proving anything. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs to. Your elevation isn't a performance. It's a reality. One that doesn't include their approval, their presence, or their understanding. And that truth, that quiet, unshakable truth, is what destroys their ego, not your anger, not your hurt, not your rebuke, but your peace. You rise. You don't explain. And they're left with the echo of the person they could have grown with but didn't.